And he tells the story of meeting Eric Bischoff at Antonio Inoki's World Wrestling Peace Festival that year, and Bischoff just approached him, introduced himself, and offered him a job on the spot. And that was typical WCW, as an insider and as a tape trader at the time. I remember when Chris Jericho was in ECW, I knew that there was no chance he was going to go to the WWE. WCW was the company that was signing those type of wrestlers, and of course, they had a lot of money to throw around, so they just offered him a contract that the WWE probably could never offer him, plus the WWE probably didn't even know who the fuck he was. So it was one of those things where all those guys, you just knew what company they were going to wind up in, and WCW was building an enormous and strong undercard with a lot of great talent, and those cruiserweight matches were so instrumental in WCW's success during that time. And Jericho goes into that a great deal. He's always been adamant for years that a big part of WCW's success were those cruiserweight matches, because if you're watching Nitro and it's a 2-hour show, there's a lot you have to watch to get to the main event. And had it not been for those matches, I don't know if the ratings would have stayed so strong for WCW, because you have to think about it. People are tuning in for Goldberg and the NWO, but something has to keep them tuned in. And if the quality of the matches are fantastic, they're not going to switch over to Raw to see what's going on there. And the first year or so that Jericho was in WCW, it was really tough for him because he was a squeaky clean babyface, and this was at the beginning of the Attitude Era. It was the absolute worst character someone could be at the time, and Jericho had a hard time getting over, and he wasn't looking very good, and his matches weren't very good, and he just really wasn't that happy. I think it took something like over a year before they finally turned him heel, and that's when Jericho started getting hilarious. Now, this is some of my favorite times in Chris Jericho's career because of how entertaining he was. And when you look back at what a clusterfuck WCW was, they really let Chris Jericho come up with his own shit. Anything you see Chris Jericho do on Nitro that cracked you up, he probably came up with on his own. The creative team didn't tell him to do it. He did it. The reason for that is because WCW doesn't have any future plans for Chris Jericho. He's just a guy on their roster. He's not one of the main guys, and they're not paying attention to him, and they just say, fine, go out and do whatever you want. We're not going to push you anyway. And what does Jericho do? He goes out there and gets himself over as a hilarious crybaby heel. His promos were hilarious. He always had great one-liners, and he would throw in little funny pop culture references that maybe a lot of people wouldn't even get. I love the stuff he did with Dean Malenko when, he's interviewing the poster of Dean Malenko, and then after Malenko beats him in, I think, the Battle Royal when he was dressed as Super Colo, Jericho goes to Washington, D.C., and they did all those vignettes where he's going in the library and interviewing people on the streets, trying to find the official pro wrestling rules so he can, sue or try to get his belt back from WCW because he was so wrongly screwed out of it. Just hilarious shit, and there was no writing for this. They just ad-libbing everything and just improvising everything they were doing, and it's just fucking brilliant shit. I also love the way he would just completely fuck up his hair on purpose. He had that big, long, blonde hair, and sometimes he would just tease it all up in the air with hairspray, and it would be really big, or he would tie ponytails in all 3 different directions or out the side, or, just making himself look like an idiot, and he said that he was just amusing himself. That's all he was doing. I think the whole time he saw the writing on the wall in WCW, so he used this time, to keep himself amused and to keep himself happy, and he did a fucking great job with this character.